opt out, I don't see a problem with it. The biggest thing is we have to be able, before we do any major changes, we have to be able to ensure that we keep the promises tomorrow that we make today. Meaning, those that are going to be dependent on Social Security, and whether the magic number is 40 years old or 35 years old or 30 years old, what have you, or 50 years old, whatever, we have to if we do any changes, we have to give those that the changes will be made for time to prepare for it. So whether you're 35 years old and the federal government tells you, hey, you got 30 years to prepare for retirement on your own, whether you go to something like a single payment system or a double-decker system, means testing Social Security. Something obviously has to be done to it, because the amount of money and the way how much Social Security spending is growing, it's going to be broke soon. We've got to get more people paying into it. Our population needs to grow, but also there needs to be some sort of a change or a restructure to it. So, yes, I could see, as long as it can sustain itself, I'm okay with people opting out, yes.
Which is never going to happen.
First, we need to make sure that those that are on Social Security or close to retirement, we are not talking about doing anything to change that system. We've made those obligations, we've made those promises. My parents' generation should be ensured that we're going to live up to those promises. But that does not mean that it is completely inflexible. I'm part of a generation that before I could vote, my retirement age was raised to 67. I know many in this room had a similar experience. What I have talked about when it comes to Social Security is this is an area where we need to drop our partisan swords and our partisan shields. We don't need a Democrat solution, we don't need a Republican solution. You've heard me talk about we need an American solution, because these problems can be fixed if people come in good faith to the table and resolve it. But right now, too often, our sometimes friends on the left score political points and try to get votes by scaring seniors. And we need to put that down, and we need to solve this problem. It can be solved, and it's actually not that complicated of a solution if everybody acted in good faith.
Well, I'm closer to that retirement age than anybody else up here. And in fact, my wife already is at that age. I think that I have always advocated, and I've made it very clear, that I would like to see private templates available for individuals to opt in or out of this system and the particular system. I think it's very important for us to keep the promises, and I have it broken down. Age 55 and above, you are in the system now, you stay in that system. 45 to 55, you have the opportunity to opt in or out to the system. Below the age of 45, you have a modernized private template that you can use. You invest your income in that money. It's your account, it's not the federal government's account. The account survives you, the account belongs to your estate, the account goes to your estate if you pass before retirement age. That is the way this system ought to work. We can do the very same thing with Medicare, and I think this is something I think is very important. My wife and I are both, my wife is on Medicare right now, and I will be entering Medicare this year myself. So these are the kinds of things that I think are very necessary for your generation, for you, because I think it's important for you to be able to have some sustainment and have control of things yourselves, and thus be accountable to yourselves for your futures. What a concept.
All right, question number 11. An ongoing issue in Crimea has created tense talks between the United States and Russia. Do you believe the people of Crimea have the right to self-determination as laid out in the UN chapter? Should the U.S. be more involved, less involved, and what role should we play when dealing with Russia?
During my tour in the United States Pentagon, and when I was serving in the Pentagon, I was a Sovietologist, I was a Russian expert, and I picked up some experience in working in the Middle East. My view of this is Crimea is ethnic Russian. Ukraine is an area that actually where the Russian Empire was born. This exercise is as Russian as the day is long. Vladimir Putin is acting as a Russian, not as a communist, not as a Soviet, not in any other form or fashion. So I think that what we're seeing right now is the Russian Empire reestablishing its borders. What I think we ought to do is to make it very clear to the nations that border Ukraine, such as Moldova, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, and the Baltic states, to make clear to them that we are part of NATO, we want them to be part of NATO, we want them to be part of the Western economic system. I think that's really what we ought to do, and I think the boldest step we could take is to renew our missile ballistic defense system and take it into Poland and land it there. That's pretty demonstrative. And I think other than that, we really ought to just not try to get involved in that at all, because it's not going to end well for anybody if we do.
Before doing anything with other countries, getting involved in other countries' conflicts, we need to know what we're getting involved with. The role of a United States Senator is to help oversee foreign policy and not dictate it. Otherwise, you'd have 100 people in the Senate telling us what to do, and over 400 people in the House of Representatives. You'd have 500 people in Washington trying to dictate policy. The other thing we have to do, and you have to be very careful as a candidate, but we must become very educated before we talk about it. As a senator, you should be able to report back to your constituents what's going on, but you also have to walk that fine line between giving away intelligence and giving away proper information and relaying to your constituents what's going on. I don't think anybody up here is sat in on an intelligence briefing in the better part of a decade. And we have to keep in mind what's actually, before spouting off about what we should or shouldn't do, we need to know truly what's going on. And we need to know the truth. I look at my own self in my career in the Navy. First night we ever shot missiles, we were told that building was full of chemical weapons. A couple of days later, we had an admiral on my ship. 100%, that building was full of chemical weapons. 4 months later, that building was full of baby aspirin.
Right.
So before we do anything, we need to know exactly what we're doing.
Crimea should be allowed to self-determine, but they're facing, and Ukraine is facing, a very determined Russia that wants to expand beyond its current borders. I think we should do more than economic sanctions against individuals, like we have seen this president do. I would like to see some economic sanctions against Russia. I think they should pay a price for expanding into Crimea and currently looking over the border at Ukraine. But I disagree fundamentally with John McCain, for example, and that's a familiar thing for me to say. I don't agree with him much at all. But I disagree. I don't think we should be sending even non-lethal aid to Ukraine. We need to have a strong NATO, and we need to have a strong European Union. And one of the ways we can do that is to export natural gas to the European Union so that they don't have to depend as much on Russian natural gas, that about 70% is piped right through Ukraine. And if we could give them a little more energy independence from Russia, then Europe would be able to better take care of this problem, and we could diplomatically support them with that.
Okay, question number 12. Last week the House passed Paul Ryan's budget. What are your thoughts on his budget proposal? Are there parts that you enthusiastically agree with, and is there anything you might suggest be done differently?
No, there's not much enthusiasm in a budget that doesn't balance as far as the eye can see. I mean, I guess the only enthusiasm is it's better than President Obama's budget, which grows the national debt to $25 trillion. We have a serious spending problem on our hand. And one of the rules that I learned growing up in Ankeny is when you find yourself in a hole, you stop digging. And right now, the United States of America, as we continue to deficit spend and not make the tough choices in Washington, D.C., it's completely detached from reality. And I've been clear. I've talked about aid to countries that don't like us very much as one opportunity. Aid to the UN is another opportunity. Getting rid of baseline budgeting is another opportunity to move closer to balancing the budget. I've also talked about giving managers in the federal government, which I worked for 5.5 years, a little less year over year and making them manage. But ultimately, what I'd like to see is a balanced budget amendment to our nation's constitution. I think it's the only way that we will have serious budget reform in our country. You know, one U.S. Senate vote, one U.S. Senator voting yes for a balanced budget amendment in the 1990s would have changed the course of history for America ever since then, but we didn't get it done, and we need to get it done now.
One of my favorite sayings when it comes to money is, millionaires don't use the credit card to go to the movies. Millionaires use the credit card for investments to make more money. We cannot keep going further in debt. Regarding the most recent budget, it takes 10 years just to balance it. And they think that's great. I think it's atrocious. My litmus test, and I've been clear on this since day one, I want a path to solvency. I want our nation out of debt. I don't want her to stay in debt. 40 years ago, last time this Senate seat was open, our entire nation's debt was $500 billion. Our leaders in Washington told us we can't afford to pay off $500 billion. So we got a great idea. We're going to go further in debt. Now every year we pay magically $200 billion just in interest. We need to not only right the ship, we need to turn it around and start creating a path to solvency. We need somebody to go to DC and not be afraid to put everything on the table, and not be afraid to face the big decisions, and not be afraid to risk being voted out of office for doing the right thing. Thank you.
Since 1932, 82 budgets have been proposed, and of those 82 budgets, only 12 delivered a surplus to the Treasury of the United States. Only 12. 6 times Democrats were in control of Congress, 6 times Republicans were in control of Congress. This is a blight on both houses. Deficit spending is wrong, and it needs to be stopped immediately. I'm not in favor of this budget. I would never be in favor of this budget. I agree that we need a balanced budget amendment. I think we need to freeze spending, freeze it right now today, freeze spending until such time as the revenues of the Treasury of the United States exceed the expenditures. And then whatever is there to exceed the expenditures is then applied directly to the debt of the United States. I think what you do then is you take the hammer and put it in the hands of Congress, where it should be. You put it in the hands of the people, and it forces the executive branch of the United States government to manage the money like you and I have to in our businesses. And I think that's the appropriate way to go. And it also, by the way, makes the budget easy, because all you have to do is duplicate it 10 times and turn it in. Then you just sign it once, there you go.
All right, once again, I'm going to have Mr. Shaven answer this question first. Gun violence has taken place at a number of schools in recent years. What steps do you think should be taken to prevent future mass shootings in public places? How should our Second Amendment rights be protected while doing our best to reduce crime?
Great question. Defending our Second Amendment, supporting our Second Amendment. Great slogans that fit on bumper stickers at Buicks that lots of politicians see in parking lots, and they come into forums like this and rattle them off. I've been very clear on this. I'd like to see a 50-state concealed carry permit that the everyday citizen can attain. Right now, if you want to go to Illinois or Minnesota, you have to pull over to the side of the road and put something in the trunk. Otherwise, you become a criminal in a neighboring state. We have over 250,000 concealed carry permit holders in this country. We need to allow people to be able to defend themselves, including teachers and school administrators. And for that matter, on college campuses, we need to allow the students to be able to defend themselves. As long as you can prove that you're not a dangerous person, I don't see a problem with the everyday citizen attaining a concealed carry permit.
I've been endorsed by the Gun Owners of America. I'm a concealed carry permit holder, and I don't have to go far to find a gun, so I'll just leave it at that.
Exactly.
I also made the statement, and it'll be on the TV this weekend with Dan Winters, that we ought to lift the gun-free zones on our military installations and allow our soldiers to defend themselves. We allow them to take a gun into combat. I think we ought to allow them to keep guns in their houses and protect themselves and protect each other. That's what soldiers do. They protect each other. I really think that this is one of the great challenges that we have here is not on gun violence, because there are 100 million gun owners in America that own 300 million guns, and all of us, most of us, are responsible people. What we really ought to focus on is the mental health issues that exist, because of the last 5 mass shootings, all of these were young white males who had mental health issues that had been identified, and they needed help in that area and not necessarily in gun control, because that's really what we're talking about here. If we want to control guns, the more guns you have in a free society, the less likely you're going to have those kind of outbreaks again.
I guess I have more than my fair share, Sam.
So
Well, you know, many of you know that I've been local counsel of the NRA, and we were there when the Iowa Firearms Coalition was born. And, you know, I've been a strong advocate for the Second Amendment. I believe that, you know, gun owners, the more the merrier. I'd rather have a restaurant full of concealed carry permit holders than a restaurant that has none. And I just believe that, you know, our Second Amendment rights are just so endeared. But, you know, I share the concern about mental health, and I share the concern that, you know, sort of common sense, you know, mental health exchange of information isn't happening as it should across our nation. And so, you know, for me, I believe in an armed citizenry, both for recreational use and for personal protection. And it's a basic tenet of our fundamental constitutional rights. And so, you know, how do we prevent mass shootings? You know, it's a difficult challenge. We need to make sure that we get people the mental health resources and the doctors and the support that they need. And it's also making sure that anywhere that a shooter is, that there's folks that are willing to defend our fellow citizens.
Thank you. That concludes the question portion of our debate. We will now move on to the closing remarks. Each candidate now has the opportunity to give a 1-minute closing remark. We will start with Mr. Clovis. And
Like it or not, we get to stand up for this part. We've been sitting a long time. I think tonight is an excellent demonstration of people that care enough to come out and meet the primary voters that we expect to deal with and to answer those hard questions. And I think, again, I'm going to make this very clear. You must be present to win. The issue that I want to announce here is you have to be able to have the conviction, the commitment, the courage, and the concern to be out here today to come in and talk to voters. And if you're not here, you don't deserve to be in this race.
I'd like to backtrack just a couple of questions quickly. When it comes to foreign aid, much like tonight, you can't buy friends. And everybody here tonight, I'm pretty sure we're not in a room full of maxed out donors to these 3 candidates. So I'd like to thank you, friends, for coming here tonight. I'm an everyday Iowan ready to represent everyday Iowans. And I'd like to thank you all for coming here. Again, my biggest stuff though is the path to solvency, the 50-state concealed carry. We didn't get into it tonight, but clearly defined veterans benefits so our veterans do know on their date of discharge exactly which benefits they will or will not receive before ever leaving base. Thank you for the time. Lots of familiar faces, and I appreciate your passion, because it is your passion that even though that may have to shine through come June 14th.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm Matt Whitaker, I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I'm asking for your vote June 3rd. I'm running on a platform of standing up for liberty and freedom. Freedom from Obamacare. We didn't get to talk a lot about it, but it's a $1.2 trillion wet blanket on our nation's economy. Economic freedom. We are now 12th in the world on economic freedom. Right behind that beacon of economic freedom, Estonia. And I also want to stand up for religious liberty. I think this administration, more than any administration in our nation's history, has been inflicting and advancing against our religious liberties. And while we're at it, we need to stand up for our Second Amendment rights. We need to stand up for our Fourth Amendment rights. I believe that this election is about standing up for freedom, which I have talked about being the calling of our time. Join me in this effort. We need your help. We need your prayers. God bless America. Thank you.
All right, that marks the end of the Grandview University United States Senate Candidate Debate Forum. Thank you to everyone involved that made this event successful, and that includes all of the candidates and the campaigns for coming and engaging in respectful and friendly debate. And most of all, to all of you for coming and supporting this event. We sincerely appreciate it. Have a great night and drive safely.
Boomy gonna say second row pictures here.
Yeah, Boomy.
You good?
It's fine.
I got some people want black beer.
Yeah? I don't drink.
So come out.
Just kidding. Today's my day. I can drink today.
I'm hungry. I haven't
All you need to do is pour some alcohol down in the What's up, German? What's happening? Good to see you. Oh. How about, yeah, sure. What kind of questions would you have asked these guys? Sure. I just thought that it's unfortunate that they don't want to. They want to please everybody, so that they'll say one thing and then it will relate to more than one thing. And I know it's so hard.
Yeah.
I know it is.
Just be aware of that.
Oh, I'm always aware of that, because even if this thing wasn't on, we're still being recorded. Oh, you know, we got cell phone right here.
We're not gonna tell you.